Okay, so I've got somewhere around 30 inches of these dark green beads onto my 24 gauge copper core wire in green. And because it's a solid color, I can just work off the spool. I don't have to measure and cut anything, so I can just string all the beads that I need for a single leaf at once. And then I've got about 3.5, 4 inches of 30 gauge copper core wire that we're going to be using for lacing. So I've already got that prepped, folded in half, and ready to go when I'm ready to add my lacing wire. All right, now let's set up the frame. Leaf B has a 1.5 inch basic row. So I'm just gonna straighten out my beads. I just run my finger along and make sure they're all straight. That way I can get an accurate measurement. And then I'm gonna measure out 1.5 inches of beads. And I do have a top wire extension bead. I'm just gonna go ahead and add that now. So I've got 1.5 inches plus 1 bead for my top wire extension. Again, you can add that top wire extension bead later if that's better for you to do that. We're going to set up our bottom wire, and we're going to make that about, how long is that? That's about 2 or 3 inches there long. Should be plenty of room to wrap this, this leaf. And then we're going to twist just like we did for the sepals. Try to get nice smooth twists there. Alright, now I'm going to straighten out my working wire so that I can measure out my rows better. And I'm going to straighten out my frame just by grabbing the top wire and the bottom wire, pulling in opposite directions. And then I'm also just going to kind of run my finger along those beads, make sure that they're all nice and straight. All right, now I've got this one little bead stuck up here. Maybe that's a good thing. I need that for my top wire extension, but I'm going to get it out of my little loop there. All right, top wire extension bead, I'm just going to fold it back to get it out of the way for now. Now we're going to be wrapping pointed bottom, round top for the first few rows and then switching later. So make sure that my bead starts out below that basic row. And it is longer, so it is a little bit trickier to kind of get started with your rows. So I'm going to straighten that out first and then just kind of pull it up directly beside that basic row and kind of pinch and hold at the top. And I'm going to take a minute here to kind of straighten out my rows, make sure that they're not buckling or anything. And then very carefully grab at the top. And we're wrapping around top, so I'm going to pull my working wire over at a 90-degree angle and then measure my beads so that they are right on top of that top wire but not going past it in any amount. Okay, then I'm going to do a 90-degree angle wrap here right at my top wire. Alright, so there's row 2, and this is the point where I'm going to add in my lace as you go wire. I'm just going to add it right there in the center, just like I did for the sepals. I kind of want it right in the middle of the row. You can measure it if you want. I usually just eyeball it, but you can measure about halfway. I think I need one more bead down there. Okay. And then we're going to cross those wires on the back. So I usually use my thumbnail here to mark. I want my lacing wire to go between these two beads. So I'm going to use my thumbnail there to mark. That way my lacing wire is more likely to go into those spots and not between two different beads. So again, bring the lacing wire around the back of the row and then down on the other side and then down between the beads. Alright, so there's row 2. We're going to take row 3 down to the bottom wire. Sorry, my throat's giving out a little bit here. I'm going to mold this row nice and tight while I'm going down to the bottom wire, down to that lacing wire first. And do take the time to mold your rows. Don't just let them do whatever they want. Sometimes they kind of go a little bit wonky and you just got to make them do what you want them to do. So right there, row 3, before I even get to the bottom wire, I'm just going to lace it in real quick. That's going to help me to measure out the rest of the row and keep everything nice and tidy so I don't have as much to hold in place. We're wrapping a pointed bottom, so I'm going to cross over at a 45-degree angle. Now one thing I didn't mention in the sepal video, I don't think, is that sometimes I kind of use my finger as a little wedge here. I use it as an anchor for my 90-degree angle wraps. I'll show you that in just a second. But for a 45-degree angle, you can use it kind of as a little wedge here. This gives you kind of a counter pressure on the wire that you're wrapping around, so it's less likely to bend. But it also helps me to keep tension while I'm wrapping, because with the 45-degree angle wrap, it's very important that the top of your wrap stay where it is and not slip down. So you need to have enough tension while you're wrapping in order to get the top of your wrap to stay in place. So again, 45-degree angle, I'm using my finger as a wedge. I'm not pushing down on my wires, And I am using my hand to kind of pull up on my working wire. Okay, so I'm keeping tension there. Wrap around and then back down. Cover up that bottom wire with my beads. And there's row 3 done, and we're ready to start row 4. Okay, so I'm going to straighten out my beads and then pull them up directly beside. If your frame wires ever get bent around while you're working, just grab them and pull them in opposite directions, and that should help to straighten things back out. But also make sure that your beads are nice and straight. Pull them up directly beside and kind of hold them, pinch it right together with the previous rows of beads, and then we're going to lace it in. All right, then we're going to wrap row 4 at the top wire. Again, I'm going to make sure that my top wire is straight. Cross over at a 90-degree angle. Get that top wire extension bead out of the way. Measure my beads. Now I do use my thumbnail as an anchor here as well, or even just my thumb. Sometimes my nails are a lot shorter. So you can use that kind of as an anchor to help push down on that working wire and kind of, again, a counter pressure against that top wire up there so that if you're pulling, then it doesn't bend quite as much there. So anchor while you're going around. And sometimes if my beads don't quite move up on top of those frame wires, what I do is I kind of lift that row up and push down and kind of wiggle it back and forth, and that helps to get those beads on top of that frame wire so we can cover it completely so it won't show in the finished leaf. All right, so we're ready to wrap row 5. I'm going to take a minute and make sure that my rows are molded nice together. Pinch and hold that row in place with the previous rows, and then we're going to lace it in. All right, wrap row 5 to the bottom wire. So we're going to wrap pointed bottoms. We're going to cross over at a 45-degree angle. You can use your little finger as a wedge there to help hold tension. Wrap, and then back down. All right, now we're starting row 6, and this is where we need to add our top wire extension in. We need to add it in after row 5, so before we wrap row 6. So I'm going to go ahead and start row 6 though. I'm going to lace that in there at the midpoint. And then before I wrap row 6, I'm going to bring down that top wire extension bead off of my top wire. If you didn't add yours before, you just open up that little loop and add it right on there. And now we're going to switch to a pointed top. So we're going to cross over at a 45-degree angle right above that top wire extension bead. You can use your little finger there as a wedge to create tension, and then wrap around that top wire. 45-degree angle wrap again. And go down the bottom. And before I get too far, I do want to kind of just pinch right around that top wire extension just to make sure I don't have any very large gaps between my top wire extension bead and my rows. All right, now row 7, I'm going to lace that in right there. And a 45-degree ankle wrap at the bottom wire. This is row 8. Row 9, again we're switching to a pointed top. Especially with these long leaves, with all basic frame, but especially with these long leaves, take the time to really mold and make sure that your rows are sitting beside each other and playing nice with each other. Alright, there's row 9. We need 2 more rows of beads. And sometimes if your leaf kind of feels like it's a little bit lopsided, you can kind of grab the bottom wire and the top wire, kind of shimmy them in opposite directions while also pulling in opposite directions, and that can help to straighten things out sometimes. Now, I only laced this leaf once, but if you feel like adding a second lacing wire in there is going to help you, then you go ahead and do that. You could divide, instead of putting it halfway, putting 1 lacing wire halfway, you can put 2 lacing wires, kind of dividing the basic row into thirds. So always feel like you can adjust the lacing if you need to, if that's going to help you to make your component. This is my last row of beads here. I'm going to double wrap my lacing wire. I did that on the other side too. I just didn't say that I did it. So we're going to double wrap that lacing wire there. And then we're going to wrap at the bottom wire. Need a couple more twists there. Okay, 45-degree angle wrap. And then we're going to wrap twice around that bottom wire. Now, with the sepals, we reduced eventually to just one bottom wire, but with these leaves, we need 3. So what we're going to do here is if you have any twists in your bottom wire, untwist them, and then we're going to bring this working wire down with the 2 bottom wires, and we're going to try to make them all at the same angle, just perfectly straight and parallel with each other. Now we're going to twist them, and we need to twist them in the same direction that we wrapped our working wire, otherwise it's going to come undone. Now this is actually going to be the opposite direction of the original way that we twisted the bottom wire. So we're going to grab right here at the bottom of the leaf, bring those wires all down together. We're going to grab right here at the bottom of the leaf and twist. Grab the wires a little ways down, and then you can twist the space between your hand and your fingers. And the goal here is to get a nice smooth twist. That's how I do that, is to keep all my wires parallel and then to grab a little ways below and to twist very evenly. A lot of people don't twist their wires here. I like to twist them because it gives me a little bit more strength in my finished component, provides a little bit more support for these larger components especially. But if you get a lumpy twist here, a very, very uneven and lumpy twist here, it is going to show on your finished stems. So if you're going to twist here, twist it as smoothly and as evenly as you possibly can, just to help keep your stems look a little bit more tidy and neat. All right, we're going to clip this top wire short and then fold it back down to the back side of the leaf. And then I can trim my lacing wires. All right, so there is a finished leaf B. Leaf C and D are made pretty much exactly the same. They just have a smaller number of rows and then also a shorter basic row as well. All right, so let's get set up. I'm going to make a leaf E here, which has a 7-row basic frame with a 5-bead basic row. Oh, I don't need that. Okay, we're going to do 5 beads there for the basic row, and we've only got 7 rows of beads, so we don't need a very long top wire there. So I think that's probably about 1/2 inch there that I've made in my little top wire. And we also don't need a very long bottom wire because we're going to be reducing to 1 bottom wire, so this whole loop is going to turn into 1 long length. So we can make that pretty short there. I think that's maybe about 1.5 inches long. And we're going to twist down just a few times, just enough space there to be able to wrap our rows. Straighten out my frame. And then we're going to wrap rows 2 through 7, pointed top, pointed bottom. So I've gone 3 times all the way around the basic row here, wrapping my last row. I'm going to double wrap there at the bottom wire. Now I'm going to do this a little bit different than the picture. The picture just shows 1 single bottom wire there, and you definitely can reduce that low if you really want to. I'm actually going to reduce a little bit lower here just because I want to add a little bit more grip to my leaf to make it easier to stick to the flower stem when we assemble it. So to reduce to 1 bottom wire, we're first going to remove that working wire right after we tie it off. And then I'm going to twist down just a few times there right below that leaf. These little twists here are going to give something for the embroidery floss that we're going to use to assemble our flower. It's going to give it a little bit of something to hold on to so it's less likely to wiggle around and whatnot. So then I'm going to cut down right there, right below the leaf, or right below the little twists to reduce to 1 bottom wire just a little bit lower. On the top wire here, undo my loop so I have a little bit of length there. We're going to cut that short and then fold it to the back. So that part is a little bit different than the bud sepal. So there is the leaf E, and leaf F is made pretty much exactly the same way, but with only 5 rows instead of 7.